Hey guys, what's going on? This is Andrew here today, and today I'm going to be talking about next-gen upgrades. So before I get into that, I'm just going to give like a very quick happy update. Well, my Blue Snowball microphone just miraculously started working out of nowhere, and I can finally have better sound quality videos since before I was using my webcam microphone while my Snowball wasn't working. So, quick update over, let's get into the topic of the video. I'm going to start off talking about the last console generation. So very early on into the generation, we saw games only running at sub full HD, so 720p, 900p, below 1080p. And this was especially on the Xbox One. It is no doubt that these consoles turned out to have launched pretty underpowered, and for the first time ever, you were able to build a PC equivalent for the same price, if not cheaper. I mean, this was a very embarrassing start. You had people like Austin Evans building PCs that were cheaper than these consoles, and they performed better, so not very good when your console's new and you're trying to get people to buy it. Although the PS4 did sell really well. Alright, the 360 and PS3 lasted 7 to 8 years, and Sony and Microsoft now had the expectation from the consumers to make these last long as well. So, while the Xbox One and PS4 did actually reach that expectation of 7 years, that wasn't without the inclusion of the Xbox One X and PS4 Pro. While these consoles were very impressive, they still had trouble maintaining high frame rates because of the CPU, and the PS4 Pro almost never hit 4K, even on its first-party games. You saw a lot of checkerboard rendering, fake 4K, in other words. I always felt like these were very unnecessary upgrades, as I had a feeling that new consoles were coming in just a few years, but just like with phones and PCs, some people like to get the latest and the greatest in shorter time spans. I was right about the consoles, by the way. I predicted it before the Pro even came out. As I said before, the Xbox One and PS4 came out extremely underpowered. Many hardware elitists weren't happy, and Sony and Microsoft decided to take a half step instead of releasing a new console. To this day, I still feel like we didn't need a One X and Pro, but I still feel like it did serve some purpose. However, the PS5 and Series X came out punching with a Zen 2 based CPU and a GPU that is roughly as powerful as an RTX 2070. And even with it being that powerful, you also got to take console optimization into key. Developers are mainly focusing on this platform since that's what most people are going towards when buying the games. So when talking about optimization, this can even go into potentially RTX 2080 territory. These consoles are both more powerful than the $1,200 PC I built only 6 years ago that has a GTX 1070 in it. So it's not like these machines came out underpowered like they did with the Xbox One and the PS4. If anything, they basically came out as mid to high-end PCs for only $500 and only $400 if you went for the all-digital PS4. In the next few years, I do have a feeling that 8K and HDMI 2.1 displays will drop decently lower in price, and new graphics cards will be able to handle the resolution as well as the older cards handled 4K about 2 years ago, and as well as maybe the cards are handling 4K now to an extent. Like the RTX 3090 still doesn't do 4K 60 perfectly. But you guys have to understand, 4K was becoming much more of a norm by the time the One X and PS4 Pro launched. But the thing is, I still know tons and tons of people that still play at 1080p and 1440p, so I'm not sure how long it's going to take for 4K to finally be a standard. But you already know that if there is a PS5 Pro, it's going to be targeting 8K, no doubt. The fact of the matter is, I don't feel like we need a Pro console this time around. The consoles already came out pretty high-end, and they definitely can last us above 5 years if the goddamn underpowered PS4 and Xbox lasted us 7. I understood last generation why they did what they did, due to 4K being a major gimmick, and at the same time, people were getting sick of 30 FPS and wanted more. On top of that, many people were jumping on PC to play competitive to go to those higher frame rates like 120. So, with these new consoles, most of our games now have the options to choose between high fidelity mode and high frame rate mode. So, between maybe a lower frame rate like 30 FPS or 60 with higher textures, or 120 with lower textures. I just don't see 8K catching on as fast, and I don't see the need for 8K gaming when we are still struggling to do 4K 60 on even an RTX 3090. I never bought the Xbox One X and PS4 Pro because I knew that the new consoles were just around the corner. So, sure enough, I was right. And like I said before, the One X and PS4 Pro, even though they were targeting that higher resolution and the higher frame rates, they still most of the time didn't hit the mark. I mean, it was just kind of unnecessary for them to be there because what people were hoping for, Sony and Microsoft really didn't deliver. And I just don't see, if another console comes out, that they will do any better for delivering for that higher frame rate and higher resolution. even looking back at the consoles, the slight upgrade wasn't enough for me. The CPU was still hot garbage, and they still didn't hit the target resolutions or frame rates most of the time, talking about the One X and PS4 Pro. If it ever comes to where we get a PS4 Pro or upgraded Xbox, I can almost guarantee you we won't be seeing native 8K for most of the time, just judging on what we saw when looking at the PS4 Pro and One X, when those still didn't hit the target 60 FPS, and most of the time didn't hit the 4K. The way I look at this generation, though, is a generation of balance. Much more people are getting into the hardware side of things, so they are going to start being more critical about what's released. I think Sony and Microsoft realized their mistake from last generation, where they only launched a console where the max res was at 1080p and terrible hardware in general. This time around, both systems output to 8K. They have the newest HDMI technology. They are targeting 120Hz, and they are now giving you the option between higher visuals or a smoother frame rate. This generation, I can definitely see a bigger focus on ray tracing load times and better frame rates over more realistic characters, so I have a feeling even older end hardware like the GTX 1070 will be able to hold its own until next gen, as long as RTX is turned off on PC. If I'm completely wrong, I'll be the first to admit it. So basically what I'm saying, guys, is the PS5 and the Xbox Series X are already powerful enough, are already more than up to date enough. Most people don't even have HDMI 2.1 displays. Those are very, very new technologies. That's future-proofing. Most people don't have 8K. That is also very much future-proofing these consoles. These consoles already off the bat have hardware that are going to be probably utilized by most people in the next 3 to 4 years. So just the fact that these came out around this time already just goes to show that Microsoft and Sony came prepared with these systems. I just don't see why we need to have a next gen like a current gen upgrade when the consoles are already punching above their weight limit. I mean their weight class, I meant. The Xbox One and PS4, like I just said before, they only launched at being able to do a max res at 1080p. The hardware was shit. It was most of the time hitting 30 FPS. You were almost never maintaining that 60 FPS. It was just a mess. And even when the fucking upgrades came around, you were still seeing that they weren't hitting their target. So with these consoles right here, why would we even need a Pro? I mean, they're already punching above their weight class. Why would we need to have a Pro console if these consoles are already holding their own? I don't really know, guys, but I'm going to end this video basically saying I probably won't be getting the mid-gen upgrades if they ever do end up coming out. And I can definitely tell you that if I wasn't going into game development, I definitely wouldn't go for them. I very much enjoyed my PS4 and Xbox One for the time I had them. I know I had a PC as well, but that was much more powerful and definitely more powerful than the One X in general. I was very, very happy with the One and PS4. The games were great. I will say that they were definitely underpowered as hell, and it was very underwhelming for a hardware enthusiast like me. But I gotta say, as long as my games hit 60 FPS for this generation, for the most part, all of them, actually, no, not for the most part, all of the games have the option to choose between the fidelity and the frame rate. As long as I am getting my 60 FPS, I will be happy with what I have. So I also have a 120Hz laptop and phone, and I honestly don't feel a difference at all visually. So like I said before, I am going to be studying to become a game dev next year, so things could definitely change to where I do change my mind and end up getting the systems to start developing for them and start working my way around them. But at that point, I'd probably have a dev kit. I really don't know. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching my video. I will see you all in the next one. That's my hot take on the subject.